So in the previous video, I talked about science using methods that are systematic, empirical, meaning evidence-based, and publicly accessible, or creating public knowledge. In this video, I want to talk about that last part, because anyone could just say that they have evidence for any old claim they make. They could just say they've got proof for this or that, but without the receipts, without making that information public to be checked by others, we're just taking them at their word. It's not a very strong basis to build our understanding of the world on. So, no, for science to work and be convincing, it needs to be out in the open. The results need to be shared and also available to be judged and double-checked. So what you'll find a lot in the commercial world, especially like in the health and wellness kind of space, is a lot of claims that things are quote-unquote scientifically proven or clinically proven, but then their work isn't actually carried out or shared in the way science normally is. Basically, they want you to believe there's evidence for their bullshit, so they mention science to borrow its credibility. But they're often not doing or sharing actual science for their claims. To take one out of a million examples, the ads for this skincare product use terms like clinically proven and scientifically proven, but not a single bit of evidence is actually provided. There's no source for claims of 73% this or 95% that, which they just attach to the big bright colored arrows in the ad up there. Just take their word that it's proven. Indeed, if you look at the tiny fine print or click deep into a really hard to find bit in their webpage, you might find a disclaimer that this is just an ad and the claims haven't been scientifically substantiated, nor are they evaluated by the FDA. So a big red flag, like a warning sign for me, is always language about proving things. A term like scientifically proven is pretty much an oxymoron. Science is not in the business of proving things. The evidence may be incredibly strong for something, but we must always accept the possibility of new evidence. Like, Newton's law of universal gravitation seemed airtight and undeniable for centuries, right up until Einstein came along with special and general relativity. And as the evidence accumulated for Einstein's arguments, we had to update things. So in your own scientific writing, or writing about science, I encourage you to avoid the word prove. Avoid statements like, my study proves that such and such, or previous work proved that whatever. Another thing to think about when you see statements like clinically proven about some product, even if they did actually run some sort of research study, perhaps a half-assed one, and they found some positive result in their favor, we have no idea if the first, 12 other studies that they tried running actually showed the opposite pattern. If so, do you think the company is going to tell you about those studies that didn't work? Or would it be in the company's best interest to run study after study after study till they happen to find some data that supports their claims and then only show you that study, or only show you the measurement that happens to support their claims and ignore all the measurements that don't tell you about those? So researchers doing actual science tend to follow certain principles in order to avoid those sorts of biases or conflicts of interest. So good scientists will not only publish their results, like put it out there, but they'll publish the details of their methodology that they used. They'll publish all of the results, not just the results that fit their own narrative. And they'll publish, their interpretation of the data, but also some alternative possibilities or the limitations of their work. Note that also when we publish in peer-reviewed journal articles, we acknowledge conflicts of interest, like whether a for-profit company funded or carried out the research or something like that will always be mentioned somewhere in there. Now, in practice, there will be scientists who don't follow these best practices, and indeed we'll learn about how to systematically improve that when we talk about the so-called replication crisis later on. But the point is that for science to work, researchers need to make their work, their methods, their results, all these details public so that others can judge it accordingly and check or replicate the work. Now, usually science is shared publicly in peer-reviewed journal articles. It's a somewhat standardized format of technical writing where we share work with other scientists and over time build a cumulative record of scientific work, what we often call the research literature. As in, I did a thorough review of the research literature on growth mindset interventions and found that the evidence is lacking for any larger general effect. Something like that. When we say articles in these journals are peer-reviewed, by the way, that's one system that we use to help weed out poor, sloppy, or biased science. In practice, it means Before publication, anyone's work is carefully checked by multiple independent scientists who are experts in that field. So they read the paper closely, they find problems with it, stuff like that. Peer reviewers might then reject the work, not publish it at all, or they might require the authors to tone down exaggerated claims that they made based on the actual data, or they might have the authors run additional studies to confirm an effect, or make the authors provide additional details or mention more of the limitations of their work, maybe information to put the data in context, stuff like that. So peer review is not a perfect system. It doesn't solve everything, but it does provide some important checks to ensure that kind of overall we can have higher confidence in what's written in peer-reviewed journal articles than, say, a self-published book or someone's blog or Wikipedia or something like that. Now, as far as what peer-reviewed journal articles usually look like, we'll get really familiar with the general format in this course. Sometimes the ordering or exact naming of these headings, these subsections, are going to differ depending on the field of science someone's working in or the specific journal they're publishing in. But for someone publishing a new empirical study, meaning they're sharing some new data, somewhere in the article you'll generally find all of the following information. So first, there'll be a title and some contact information and affiliations of the people so that you know if the work was done at like a university or some for-profit company that might have ulterior motives. Then you'll usually find an abstract, which is basically a short summary of the whole article. It can be nice for getting a quick idea of what's in there, whether it's relevant to you, but it's usually missing a lot of crucial context and details and limitations of the work, so you can't rely on that alone without reading the article. Then there's generally an introduction section, providing some background, talking about previous research, previous theories in the area, and really the motivation for this new study that they're going to be telling you about. Then there will be a method section that'll give details, basically a step-by-step of what was done in their study, sometimes in pretty excruciating and boring detail, but the idea is that it's clear enough someone else could repeat the same study themselves and replicate that work if they wanted to. Also, it provides us enough detail to judge whether the way they carried out the study is actually solid, or whether there are some glaring problems with how they did it. Then there's a results section. That's where you find the actual data, the numbers, the outcome of what they did. Often the graphs and tables will be in here. Statistics might be applied here, whether they're descriptive to summarize the data or inferential statistics to make conclusions that generalize from this data. Then there will be some sort of discussion section, sometimes called a conclusion section, that'll summarize things in plain language, provide an interpretation of the data, often should cover limitations of the work, and might also talk about where future work should go on this topic. And then finally, there's a little bit at the end, there will usually be a references section. In some fields, it might be called bibliography or works cited, but that lets you follow up on any of the scientific articles that this paper cited, or the stuff that it talked about in there earlier. So this area will have all the info you need to go find that prior work. And then maybe there will be an appendix with some more detailed info, including the text of the entire survey that you used or something like that. So it's basically all the stuff you'll find in a typical peer-reviewed journal article that is sharing some new data. We call that an empirical article. That's a type of article. Sometimes, though, you'll see a different order, different headings, maybe they did two different experiments in there that they're reporting on the same paper. So it might look more like this. And then there are also other types of articles, still peer-reviewed journal articles, but if they're not reporting on brand new data, if they're not an empirical peer-reviewed journal article, they might be a review article. So still peer-reviewed, still published in a journal, but a review article is more like a summary of a bunch of previous work rather than reporting some brand new data. Or a meta-analysis is another type of peer-reviewed journal article. This is when someone runs statistics in a systematic way to summarize the results across a whole bunch of previous studies that were done. If 40 different laboratory studies have been done on whether spicy food makes people grumpy with their romantic partners or something like that, a meta-analysis could combine all of that data together across those 40 studies to get a best guess of whether the effect really exists and how strong it is if so. So there might be a few studies where they found no effect, a few studies where they found a big effect, a few studies where they found a small effect, and they might, in this meta-analysis, look at the quality of those and weigh the ones with better quality or larger sample sizes stronger when they throw it all into the statistics and find that overall, okay, we have evidence for maybe a small effect or an effect only for some subgroups or something like that. That's what you might find in a meta-analysis. So rather than brand new data, it's kind of like reanalyzing a bunch of old data. Okay, so as I said, the collection of all the peer-reviewed journal articles out there, it makes up the bulk of what we call the research literature. Millions of research papers that have all been vetted by other scientists before showing up in journals. And some journals are more prestigious than others. Some, only publish the sexiest new results, while others will publish any good work regardless of the outcome. But usually within a given field of science or within a given specialty like developmental psychology or industrial organizational psychology, the scientists working in that area will have a core set of well-known journals that they publish their work in. What I want to talk about now is how we access those journals and the papers within them, because remember, the method of science is supposed to be all about publicly accessible knowledge, making public knowledge. So to start with, I want to be clear that there are other sources of knowledge out there, including some that are really cool and useful, which aren't considered part of the scientific record. For instance, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is freaking amazing, and it can be really helpful as a source for getting basic info about a lot of topics, or even in-depth info about some topics. Overall, though, the info in it might be pretty reliable, kind of on par with old printed encyclopedias, but it is not it's not equivalent to a peer-reviewed journal article. So it's not a primary source. It's not someone reporting new information. Wikipedia is a secondary source, meaning it points to and summarizes other stuff. It points to and summarizes primary sources, like the actual research articles. So it may give a good overview, excuse me, but don't cite it as if it's a primary source. Instead, think of it as one place, one among many, where you might find some interesting leads or a place to start when you're learning about a new topic. It'll have a references section at the bottom of each entry, and for scientific topics that include links a lot of the time to peer-reviewed journal articles down there, that can be helpful. So you could follow the links to those primary sources, the ones you actually want to cite in your own scientific writing, rather than Wikipedia itself. So for example, in the screenshot here, you can see the first reference includes all the info I would need to find the peer-reviewed journal article they're referred to. Even without a link, I can see here the authors, the year it was published, the title of the article, the journal it was published in, and even the volume number of the journal and the specific page numbers of that article. So that is plenty of information to find the original work and see if Wikipedia's summary of it or reference to it is accurate or possibly inaccurate. However, in the references section on Wikipedia, you'll also find tons of links to sources that are not peer-reviewed journal articles. There's no guarantee the references in Wikipedia are scholarly sources at all. So some go to a generic news site, a TV channel's write-up, or even like a shitty tabloid or blog or whatever else. So instead, what I want to do is point you to a couple ways that you can find better direct source, go straight to the primary literature and find peer-reviewed journal articles on any topic you want to learn about. So one example would be if you go to a university library's website, pretty much any university, you're going to find a page to search for articles and databases. So if I click into that, the most common database used to search for peer-reviewed work in psychology is a database called PsycInfo. So when I go into the databases pages, I just scroll down, find PsycInfo, and click that. Basically, any university with a psychology department will have a subscription to this. So when you click PsycInfo on the library website, it goes to a search page that looks kind of like this one, run by EBSCOhost. Now, you can see here we're set to search the PsycInfo database, but you can also add others to the search. Like there's other databases, one called ERIC for education journals, stuff like that. Or you can just add in all the databases if you want to search them all at once, but you'll get more irrelevant stuff filled in there. Here you can either just type in what you want in the search field or fill out some of the more advanced search options. So you can click advanced search up there by the search area, or some of the stuff that's down below here. So in the lower left, you see a checkbox if you want to limit it to peer-reviewed journal articles. That seems helpful. That way it won't bring up books or newspaper articles, things like that. There's another checkbox if you want it to only show you articles where your university, your library has access to the full text. as opposed to just, an entry or an abstract or a summary telling you a little about the article but not actually having it. You can also limit it to articles from recent years, anything like that. At this point, though, you probably just want to start by diving in. Start searching for your keyword or keywords and see what you run into. So, for example, if I type in Mozart effect, I might get, 150 or so results. Now, at that point, you could just scroll and scroll till you find one that sounds interesting and click the PDF full text button, which will likely be there if you limited the search to things with a linked full text. And then you can print or save a PDF, right? The PDF of that article opens up. You can read it when you're ready or browse it now, see if it's relevant enough for your purposes. And then you might go back, find another relevant looking article and repeat until you know all of the science. Now, another example might be searching for something like Lumosity, right? A brain training game, a specific brand. But doing that, you might only get 4 hits, right? So if you want to know about research done on that, you might need a better keyword, right? So often it helps to play around with the keyword, try different variations. So instead of Lumosity, I might use a wider search term like brain training games. That gets some more hits. If I go even wider, like brain games, it gets even more articles that might be relevant, although now you might run into a few that aren't applicable. Now you can also use the word and between 2 terms. To get articles, you use both terms, like exercise and depression. If you want to, you're trying to figure out whether exercise and depression are linked or whether exercise helps with depression or something like that. Now, you can also use the term not, or there's like a not drop down in the advanced search settings to ignore articles about something you don't want included. Like if you're searching for exercise and depression, it might be showing you a ton of articles about exercise in elderly people, but you want to know if it's been studied in younger people. So you could add not and then older or something like that to your search keywords, and it'll get rid of a bunch of the articles you were seeing that weren't relevant. Now, if you're not finding enough articles, again, you could go back and add more databases than just PsycInfo, and you might find more stuff, though not all of it will be psych related. And then, of course, you can just keep trying variations on keywords. So some search tips I recommend when you're using a database like this: just put keywords into the search bar, not entire sentences. Don't try and write it out as if you'd, talk to ChatGPT or something. Just write specific keywords and play around with different variations of those words. So you might try synonyms, use a thesaurus if you need to, or look at once you found a couple of journal articles to look through, you might see the terms they use in this field, this area. So, combinations of fitness, develop, neurons, exercise, exercising, whatever it is. And then, of course, try clicking advanced search and playing with those options, and it might help you find what you want as well. Now, that said, I find these databases found through a library to be clunky as all hell. They're usually run they run slowly. A lot of the times they don't have the full text of the article I really need. So there are some other options that can be really handy. And in my case, I usually go to them well before I ever try going through the library. So for one example, there's a website called PubMed, which is hosted by the National Institutes of Health, and it contains a great deal of psychology research. A good number of these articles there are going to have full text attached for free because NIH-funded research must now be released to the public after at least some delay. You can again narrow things down to those that have like a full text available. You can limit it to things like a meta-analysis or a randomized controlled trial or just review articles or things like that. When you click into them, some though you'll find are not free. They don't have the free thing on there. Instead, they might just show you the abstract, plus a link to some journal publisher's website. Usually that link will be with a DOI like this. That's short for Digital Object Identifier. It's just a permanent number assigned to this specific article so that it can always be found online in the future, even if a website changes or gets shut down or a publisher gets sold or whatever. Now, sure enough, if you click through to one of those articles that doesn't have the full text for free, the journal might ask you for some insane amount, like $40, just to read that one article. So you could try finding it through the university library's website at this point. You could go back to the website, try and find it through there. But if your university doesn't subscribe to that journal, you're just out of luck, right? And journal subscriptions already eat most of the budget of an average university library, so they just can't subscribe to everything. Thankfully, I'll show you in a minute a way to access those articles even if your university library doesn't have access to them. First, though, one other common place to search for articles to find the ones you want is Google Scholar. So on Google, you can just type in Google Scholar or find it in the drop-down. And it's a different database, but you use it similar to a normal Google search engine. In this case, with some options, you can specify only recent articles or only review articles or things like that. But often it'll have a clickable link right there in the results to a full text PDF, right there by the entry. So that can be very handy. That can help you find some new stuff. Though again, that's definitely not the case for a lot of the results, where you might not find a free article. You might click through some articles. It just leads to an expensive paywall asking you to pay something absurd like $30 just to view this one article for the next 48 hours, and that's it. And that's all before you even know if it's going to be the article you really need. You don't even maybe know what methods they used, if it's relevant or not. So, well, there are plenty of places to search for articles, find the ones you want to read, play around with keywords. You can usually find articles studying any topic you're interested in. Oftentimes the real barrier is getting access to those articles, which is why I'm going to end with this final tip. If you want to avoid the clunkiness of a university library website, or avoid being logged into anything, or just can't find a way to access the full text of an article you want without paying, you do still have some options. So for one thing, you could just email the author of the article and ask for a copy. Usually they'll be more than happy to share their work with others. But that also means a long-ass delay, so it won't work when you're frantically trying to make progress on a research paper. Which leads me to one of my favorite websites, which is Sci-Hub. So there you can simply paste in the full title of any article, or the DOI, the digital object identifier, of any article you want to access, and click open. In 2 seconds, the PDF's right there in front of you to read, save, or print. So for example, let's say I'm searching the neuropsych literature and I run into an article that's behind a paywall. The publisher wants $40 to read this one article. I can instead just copy that DOI number, the one starting with the 10 dot whatever, and paste it into Sci-Hub and click open. And voila, immediately a PDF appears. Now, yes, technically Sci-Hub is pirating these papers, but right now, the typical system of hiding scientific work behind a giant paywall really breaks the public knowledge part of what makes scientific methodology work. Most scientists support and use Sci-Hub, especially since students, people in less developed countries, and researchers at less rich institutions don't have access to huge swaths of human knowledge, which can do real damage to the scientific enterprise. By the way, don't feel sorry for the publishers of those journal articles that are getting pirated. Those for-profit publishing giants, they are predatory scumbags. They make higher profit margins than Google or oil and gas companies. What's worse, we, the researchers who do the actual work, we don't get paid for it. It's not like publishing a book. So the authors of a journal article, the researchers, get no money at all when they're publishing their research. Not only that, but we serve as the peer reviewers for each other's scientific work in a volunteer capacity. Again, totally free labor that we're not paid for. And on top of that, the editors of these journals, the people who coordinate all the peer reviewers and communicate with the authors and do all the behind-the-scenes work, that editor is also an unpaid volunteer, just some professor working at a university who does it for free. So we're talking about research that was often funded with your tax dollars via grants from the NSF or the NIH, but you as a taxpayer don't get access to it. Meanwhile, we professors do all the work, write it up, peer review it, edit it, make the journal part of everything actually happen, but that's all unpaid. Then those publishers, these big companies, predatory companies, turn around and charge out the ass, making libraries spend most of their budget on these subscriptions and making it inaccessible to individual buyers. So don't feel bad if you decide to use Sci-Hub, with its amazingly simple, smooth, and fast interface, if you find that's necessary to access the research literature that is out there.